All right, y'all, welcome back for one day. I don't know if we'll be out some more next week, but let me hide this. So let's worry about that when that time comes. I do want you to have all of your notes so that if we are out, you can use some of that time to study for your test. If you don't, that is your choice, but the consequences are also yours. All right, so just to recap, we've been out for a while. This whole unit, Unit 6, is about the Civil War amendments or the Reconstruction Amendments, and the actual Reconstruction, which had multiple goals, not only to bring the United States back together, to bring the South back into the Union, but also to rebuild the South because all the damage that was done during the war, and protect the rights of the newly freed peoples. I'm just going to go over Section 3, the stuff that we already did, very quickly as a reminder. Also, again, if it's in yellow, please highlight it. It means it's on the test. All right, so here's the key terms. Again, there are some vocabulary words on the test that you might have highlighted in an earlier section, but you also need to know what impeach means, and we'll go into this a little bit later in the presentation. Again, you need to know the differences between scallywags and carpetbaggers. Just a reminder, scallywags are from the South. These are Southerners who supported Reconstruction and Congress's plan and supported protecting the rights of the newly freed people. And so the Southern Democrats did not like them. They thought they were traitors. They gave them this negative nickname. The Southern Democrats also gave a negative nickname to any Northerners who came down to help rebuild and help do some things to integrate and protect the rights of the newly freed peoples. Those Democrats didn't like them as well, so they gave them a negative nickname, and that nickname was carpetbaggers, based off of the bags that they carried when they moved down to the South. All right, we talked about the three presidential plans or the Reconstruction plans. We talked about Lincoln's plan, Johnson's plan, and Congress's or the Radical Republican plan. You had an assignment before we left. If you have not already done so, please turn that in. There's Lincoln's plan, Radical Republican plan, Johnson's plan. During this time, the South did have to honor the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States and its territories. However, the South, especially those Southern Democrats who had the planters, who had all that political power, they then issued in the Black Codes, which was basically a legal form of discrimination. These do not last long, but the South, those Southern Democrats aren't going to give up. We're going to see some things come up later. And then, of course, Congress is going to fight back. So that ends us with the 14th Amendment. And if you did your assignment yesterday, your e-learning assignment, which was 3 videos, one on the 13th Amendment, very short, one on the 14th Amendment, which is longer, but because this amendment has a lot in it, and then the 15th Amendment. All 4 of those, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, are considered the Civil War amendments or the Reconstruction amendments because they happened during this period of history. So what is the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment declares that all people born in the U.S. or naturalized here, it means that they're came through here and are now legalized, are citizens of the United States. And that means as citizens of the United States, these newly freed people have equal protection, equal rights, and due process of law, all the things guaranteed in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, which are those first 10 amendments. Now, it's kind of weird. This amendment also gave Congress the power to reduce states' representation in federal government if they're denying black voting rights. However, this amendment actually did not grant voting rights to the freedmen directly, which brought up some concerns. Northern states worried about losing representatives since many did not allow black voting. Republicans prioritized maintaining power, leading northern states to ratify this quickly. Southern states would take much longer to ratify this amendment. And violence is going to going to erupt in the South. Race riots are going to change everything. So there's going to be some riots in the South. 100 blacks die in the Memphis and New Orleans, so Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, Louisiana riots. 12 white deaths. And it's going to change everything. Republicans, now controlling both the House and Senate, are going to take charge of Reconstruction. They're going to oppose martial law. We've talked about this. This is where the military comes in. They're going to break the South into 5 military districts, and they're going to be under martial law. Reconstruction does not end until the federal government pulls out these troops from the South. And this is kind of a second Reconstruction process. And basically, these troops are here to enforce the South, to honor the 13th, and mostly they already had honored the 13th, but mostly they were worried about this 14th Amendment. They wanted the South to make sure that they were honoring the due process, equal rights, and equal protection for the newly freed people. This is going to lead, and here I told you we're going to talk about the word impeach, Johnson's impeachment crisis. So the Republicans in Congress are worried that Johnson is going to use military control to undermine the Reconstruction efforts. And you got to remember, Johnson was a Southern Democrat from Tennessee. The breaking point is when Johnson fires the Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, without approval from the state. This is an action that goes beyond presidential duties and authority. So then he is charged with misconduct. The House impeaches him. They vote to impeach him for his illegal actions. And remember, if you remember the process, when we did our Constitution notebook of how a bill becomes law or how things happen, things have to be passed in both the House and the Senate. Both of those houses in Congress have to pass it. So he's impeached in the House. However, in the Senate, he falls short. He needed one more vote. If one more person had voted in the Senate to impeach him, he would have remained president. But if he had one more vote, he would have been removed from office, impeached, fired, if you will. However, that vote did not come through, and he remained president, but he lost all of his support. So, not good. Impeachment process, not good. All the southern states are going to have to rewrite their constitutions. In accordance with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. During Reconstruction, South Carolina has 73 black delegates in Congress, 36 Southern whites, and 15 Northern whites. Major achievements in this Constitution of 1868 is voting rights for all men, regardless of color, public education for all children, government-funded schools, though, of course, the black schools are going to receive less funding. A notable person you need to know about for your test is a guy named Francis L. Cardozo. He's a trailblazing leader. He was born in Charleston in 1836 to a free black woman and a Jewish man. He worked as a carpenter and a shipbuilder, but then he went to college in Scotland and England. His education made him the best educated man, one of the best educated men in South Carolina, the highest ranking African American in South Carolina's government during Reconstruction. He fought to integrate schools for the protection of black rights. Some of his accomplishments is in 1868, he was the Secretary of State. He was the first black South Carolinian to hold statewide office. In 1872, he was the state treasurer. Unfortunately, when Reconstruction ends, a lot of that progress of newly freed and the black and African Americans in government is going to dwindle, and it's because the Democrats gain power again. So he is removed from state treasurer. But he also has a Washington, D.C. career. He works in the Treasury Department, becomes the principal of Colored Preparatory High School, starting one of the first business education programs for black schools. So very important person not only in South Carolina, but in U.S. history. So please remember what is in yellow, highlight that because it is on your test. And this brings us again to that last Reconstruction or Civil War amendment, the 15th Amendment, a right to vote. It mandated and was ratified in 1870, guaranteed African American men the right to vote. Remember, women don't get the right to vote for another 50 years, white or black women. Doesn't matter. Women don't. It's another 50 years before women get to put their ballot in the box. So the 15th Amendment is going to prohibit denying voting rights based on race, color, or former enslavement. And it gives Congress the power to enforce this. There is, of course, some challenges. Despite its attempt, the amendment faced resistance. It did not grant suffrage, and suffrage is just a big word that means the right to vote, to women. And we're going to talk about this in the next unit, but the South gets super creative on ways to keep people, poor people, but especially black people from voting during this time. They're going to use things like poll taxes, literacy tests, and other tactics to disenfranchise, which is a big word. That means deny the right to vote. And kind of, the government kind of falls back and does not enforce this like it should. So the South kind of gets away with stuff. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about Jim Crow laws. After this, there is a very contested election. There's a Democrat, Ben Tilden. He won the popular vote. But electoral votes in Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina were contested, creating a stalemate. So there's secret negotiations. Even though Tilden got the popular vote, Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South. So this was the compromise. Okay, we will end Reconstruction. We will take the federal troops out of the South, but you have to secede the presidency, and Rutherford B. Hayes will become, the Republican, will become president. And so that's what happens. The end of Reconstruction happens. They withdraw all the troops and, unfortunately, all the federal protection for black civil rights, which is going to pave the way to what I said before, something called the Jim Crow laws, and we will study those more in the next unit. You need to know what the Compromise of 1877 was. And, of course, we can't stop in this period of time without talking about the KKK. This group definitely came to rise during this time period after the federal troops left the South. It was founded in Tennessee in 1860, a secret club for Confederate veterans, and it became a violent arm of the Democratic Party. Its terror tactics were the robes and the hoods, not just terror tactics, but also kept them anonymous. They would drag people from beds at night, beating, whipping, shooting, and even lynching. Of course, the Republicans tried to respond. They denounced them. But Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act, allowing President Grant to declare martial law in 9 upcountry counties. In 1800s were arrested within 2 months. So the effort was ultimately considered a failure. So the Ku Klux Klan's main goal was to, during this period and in the next unit, was to scare and keep, to disenfranchise, to keep the black people from voting. It evolves over time, and it's pretty much there. Is there still chapters around? Absolutely. But they're pretty much dwindled to nothing now. But they did use violence as a way. But it wasn't just the newly freed people that they attacked. The Jews, the carpetbaggers, and the scallywags, anybody that went against the Southern Democrats. It's kind of scary. I kind of see some stuff like that happening now, especially up in Minneapolis, where they are attacking federal forces because they're going against what they want. So it's kind of scary. But hopefully we've learned from history. All right, y'all. I hope you got the notes. Study for your test. And I hope you enjoyed being off school as much as I did. I got to read some books and had a great time. So, all right, y'all.